We all heard Mr. Iyer yesterday, who emphatically stated that technology is the key differentiator in this day and age, be it any industry or any field. So over the next few hours, we're going to discuss digital entrepreneurship, and we have a very eminent panel here with us today to discuss the issues relating to this field. Mr. Matthews is the founder and executive chairman of the IBS Group of Companies. He founded IBS in 1997 with a vision to redefine the way global travel, transportation, and logistics industries manage their businesses, especially in the air transportation business. 16 years later, IBS serves over 200 clients worldwide from 10 global locations, employing over 2,000 professionals from 30 different nations. IBS has acquired 6 international companies in Europe, US, and India during the past 10 years, expanding its products portfolio to cover all areas of air transportation industry. Mr. Matthews is a specialist in the aviation business with over 15 years of aviation IT experience prior to founding IBS. He holds a master's degree in aeronautical engineering from IIT Kanpur and has executive management education from the Harvard Business School in the US. Mr. Matthews is an executive council member of NASSCOM, the chairman of Kerala Regional Council of NASSCOM, and chairman of GTech, the consortium of technology companies in Kerala. He is the immediate past chairman of the Kerala chapter of the Confederation of Indian Industries. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Matthews to the dais. Next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Aruna Schwartz. Ms. Aruna is the founder and CEO of Stele Technologies, a software vendor in the big data and content analytics sector. The company has clients across the globe, but has now firm plans to target the BPO-KPO industry in India. In 2008, Stele raised funding from the Indian Angel Network, and in 2012, they moved the company to India. Ms. Aruna is an Indian who went to Aston University, England for her studies and then settled down in France. She has prior experience in marketing, product management, and business development in the telecommunications and technology sectors with BT, Cable and Wireless, Nine Telecom, and Rosebud Technologies. I welcome Ms. Aruna to the stage. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ganesh Lakshminarayan. Mr. Ganesh is the president and managing director of Dell India, providing leadership to over 27,000 people. He leads Dell's transformation from a hardware leader to the top solutions provider in the Indian market, and he also develops Dell China to be the engine for Dell's global growth. Mr. Ganesh is also the vice president, APJ Commercial Sales Operations, and he's responsible for customer experience and operational excellence for improving overall sales performance of Dell in the APJ region. He has an MBA from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and a BS in Computer Science and Engineering from Anna University, Chennai. Mr. Ganesh is a current member of the NASSCOM Executive Council. Mr. Ganesh, please welcome to the dais. Sorry, I didn't see that. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ravi Gururaj. Mr. Ravi is the chairman and co-founder of Frictionless Ventures, where he's building and investing in innovative software products, primarily in the cloud, mobile, and big data segments. Over his 25-year career, Mr. Ravi has held wide-ranging roles, including promoting an STPI unit, a product management at Intel, and he served as the managing director of Trilogy Software's India Engineering Center. Mr. Ravi received his MBA from the Harvard Business School. He also graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in the Management and Technology program, receiving a BSc in Computer Science and Engineering from the Moore School and a BSc in Finance from the Wharton School. Mr. Ravi is a member of the NASSCOM Executive Council, and he chairs the NASSCOM Product Council. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Ravi to the dais. Next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Anup Ambika, who runs Crera Solutions, which is an inspirational story. It was established in 2004 at the Incubation Center in Technopark, Trivandrum, with 2 inexperienced people. The company has come of age since, and it has charted an unconventional road of clinical research. The organization derived its strength from its promoter, Ms. Ambika, a graduate in computer science and engineering from University of Kerala with management education from F.W. Olin Graduate School of Management in Massachusetts. He built Creera, brick by brick. Armed with little ease but passion, perseverance, and self-belief, he guided a handful of energetic youngsters through the trials and tribulations to being a significant player in the life sciences industry with nearly 100 employees today. And in the My Story section, Anoop shares the story of Creera Solution. Clearly, I got the gender wrong. I'm extremely sorry for the first half. So it's Anoop and not Ambika. But welcome to the stage. So we'll hand it over to Mr. Matthews. Did I miss a person? I did. Okay. So we have one more panelist, Mr. Suhas Bide. Mr. Suhas is the head of IBM India, and his agenda includes building an industry-leading technology-ready, customer-focused competitiveness for IBM's global delivery engine in India for consulting and application services. Mr. Suhas has over 25 years of experience in the strategic deployment of IT for client organizations. His experience spans initiating, structuring, and delivering large technology-enabled in transformation projects involving strategy review, process reengineering, and large packaged and custom software implementations. Mr. Suhas has a master's in business administration from IIM Kolkata, and he has completed the program in leading professional services firms from Harvard Business School. Mr. Suhas is a current member of the NASSCOM Executive Council as well. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Suhas. So now over to Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Shruti. Good morning. Let me now welcome to the stage the chief guest of this session, the Chief Secretary of Kerala, Bharat Bhushan. Bharat, if you can please kindly come.
Once again, good morning. And let me, before starting, once again thank my friends and colleagues here. This is one of the best ever panel that we can aspire to get. We have a fantastic panel, and I think them coming over to address, to share their thoughts with the aspiring as well as the entrepreneurs in Kerala is an indication as how much they all subscribe to this view of promoting entrepreneurship in India, in our state. So the digital entrepreneurship. So the way in which I would like to run this track is that this is a rare opportunity for us to listen to these thought leaders. So all of them will speak to us about 15 minutes. So that will still give us some time for question and answers. I know the assimilation will be much better if it is going to be an interactive session. So I will take probably another 5 minutes to 8 minutes to set the tone for this meeting. The digital entrepreneur. We have intentionally called it digital entrepreneur than IT entrepreneur. So let me just move. So a new era of enterprise IT. Actually, I would call it the third era of enterprise IT. Actually, the shift in outcomes, actually what is happening in terms of what's the expectation. We used to once upon a time build application systems. Then we said we are providing services and solutions. Now we are talking about creating digital businesses. And shift in emphasis or the focus from technical architecture to business process to business models. That is the change. And shift in capabilities also. We talked about systems management to IT management, and now we talk about digital leadership. So the purpose of this track and the purpose of this session, ladies and gentlemen, is to get a view as what is the difference between an IT world and the transition to a digital world, and what are the opportunities, challenges, as well as the key success factors for aspiring entrepreneurs in this area. And in fact, the canvas is becoming much bigger than before, and that's the opportunity. And you will also see that digital entrepreneurship or the digital enterprise is different from what we actually thought as a technology play. We would require, because it is going to actually, the boundaries are expanding, as a result of which we can have people from different facets with different capabilities actively contributing and playing in this area. And that is the beauty of it. So what is digital? It is bigger than the conventional scope of the term IT. It includes data and technology outside an entity's control, such as smart devices in the hands of employees, citizens, or consumers and customers. Again, social media, leading to unstructured and multimedia data. Technology embedded in products. So if any equipment, product that you use today has technology and is increasingly becoming intelligent. Internet of Things. Basically, intelligent devices, buildings, products, factories, places. And equipment and instrument helping to trace themselves. So being able to communicate with each other to improve the efficiencies, asset utilization, etc. Digital is all forms and uses of data, information, and technology. It's very different from what some of us in the 70s and 80s used to do, to write programs which nobody understood what it was, and to run on machines which looked very complex. And the more complex it looked and less friendly it was, we took pride in the fact that we were great. But that is completely changing. So what's digital again? I think it includes, if I look from top, analytics, which is basically about information, inclusion, ecosystems. For someone else, it is marketing. It is collaboration for some other group. It's all about innovation. It's all about a lot of information overload and big data. So all of that is what is digital, or that is what we see as digital today. So the business strategy once upon a time is now giving way to digital business strategy. I was actually talking to the director of British Airways. Since we work in the aviation field, I can actually give an example. And I was asking him when he came we do some work for them. And when he came, I asked him, what is going to be British Airways in 2020, 2025? We were talking about the aviation industry growing at about 5%, and every 15 years it's going to become double. So what is going to be the play? And it was kind of an open discussion, and he was actually saying that what is really going to happen is that, so he took an example of the holding company, International Aviation Group, which holds British Airways, Iberia, British Midlands, and potentially American Airlines. So he was asking, we increasingly find that there is no real benefit of BA having its own aircraft flown by its own pilots. So he was actually thinking, if a company is going to fly 1,000 777, Boeing 777 aircraft, with its having its own maintenance base in all different parts of the world, having its own pilots trained on it and flying it. And then airlines, the brands, will subscribe to the services of that. It's huge economies of scale. And it'll also, for the airlines, it'll also reduce their fixed cost, and they can variabilize their cost. So if the demand is less, and they will be able to throttle their cost down. So in other words, we will be able to actually run services without having to operate the components of the services provided. The digital ecosystem will help us to take all of those component services, thread them together, and we will be able to run virtual enterprises, maximizing on the basis of economies of scale, reducing the fixed cost, etc., etc. In other words, we will be able to have the shocks absorbed by the world, and as a result of which we will be able to take much more bullish kind of steps to move forward. And all of that is what is about the digital opportunity that we are talking about. How will our business survive in an increasingly digital world And the answer to that question is the one which we call as the digital business strategy. Capability comes from digital and physical assets. And enterprises which have greater digital assets will be seen to be valued more than the physical assets. Digital business will require digital-ready infrastructure. So it's not about somebody sitting and writing code. It's actually a society coming from this. And there are probably journalists, there will be the advocates, there will be lawyers, there will be teachers, all of them participating in the digital enterprise. So just one slide on evolution of information. If you really look at 20 years back, we used to produce MIS reports to understand what happened. And this is still, so if you really ask the railway ministry or the Department of Railways and ask them to find out what happened last week or last month, you may still not have that. So that is descriptive analytics, which gives some sort of a hindsight. And why did it happen is the diagnostic analytics. And what will happen is the predictive analytics. And we are now talking about prescriptive analytics. How can we make it happen? So that means the tons of data that we collect from a lot of sources, we have now the capability and the science to actually process them to produce foresight. So I think this is the evolution of information, and that is the next one. In the digital enterprise, ladies and gentlemen, you have seen this particular one from Gartner. They have published even last year. So if you really look at the SMAC world, that is the social mobile analytics cloud world, and I've replaced that analytics with information. Enabled by the digital enterprise is enabled by technology, driven by human behavior, and in fact, the digital enterprise can even amplify the human behavior. And it can create new opportunities for engagement, as you can see, the collaboration and engagement creates new business opportunities too. And that is the power of the digital enterprise. And that is so why am I actually saying this? And this is the field on which, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to play. The future entrepreneurs can play. So in fact, the digital entrepreneur is nothing but the entrepreneur of the world. He is not a tech IT entrepreneur. So I don't want to spend time on this. The next one, so digital entrepreneurship, opportunities for digital entrepreneurs in bullet forms. Industry and geography boundaries is beginning to converge or blur. What it means is that is it going to be the business process innovation or the technology innovation which is leading? You don't know. Because that boundaries are going to blur. And in this field to play, India has to, you have to, I have to become knowledgeable. Meaning, I need to understand where exactly my technology is going to bring that benefit. So that boundary is going to, so if I'm working in telecom, do I understand telecom or do I understand? If I'm an IT person for telecom, I must know as much telecom as IT. It's very important. And the geography, I talked about the geography boundary because some of the developing countries, such as India, could be leapfrogging. We may be skipping several phases of development and the benefits of the development which the developed world has enjoyed once upon a time. And we will be able to leapfrog. Opportunity. Cloud computing is transforming business models. Ladies and gentlemen, this is actually clearly a threat to a lot of enterprise software companies. Today, the cloud services in its fullest form will be able to take services from the best of breed on a pay-as-you-use basis and thread them together, and you will be able to. So, gone are the days where IBS has given British Airways or All Nippon Airways an enterprise software for managing cargo and expect that it is going to be like that. No, it is not. It has threats, digital threats, and so therefore digital opportunities also will be there. And social networking gaining traction as a business tool. You clearly know that there's so much of information about the customer and their I would say, preferences, and you will be able to actually plan your marketing campaigns. You can look at how they are reacting, and you can have a proactive way of managing your brand and imagine all sorts of things. Smart mobility changing the way people work, play, and communicate, and analytics becoming a vital source of competitive advantage, and security remains a high corporate and government. So why did I talk about it? I'm sure the eminent speakers will elaborate more on this. If you take each of these areas, and if you can be very, very good at that, if we can be, security, government, and risk management and security in government, in private sector. So if you can specialize in any of these areas, all of this is tremendous opportunities. And this is my concluding slide before I invite the next speaker to speak. Yesterday, the Chief Minister of Kerala, when he was inaugurating this session, he said, it is his vision and it is his commitment to make Kerala to emerge as a startup capital of the country. He yesterday said 1% of the entire expenditure of the state will be for entrepreneurship, will be for startups. So there's a lot of commitment for the government. And so therefore, the digital era that we are talking about offers enormous opportunities for the established and aspiring entrepreneurs of this region. So ladies and gentlemen, that is the background to today's interesting topic. I'm quite sure the speakers, you cannot get a better audience. India cannot produce a better lineup of speakers than what we have today. So let's not waste time. So let me first invite, I think the person who doesn't have a prepared presentation is Ganesh. So I will invite Ganesh. As you know, he is the president of Dell. Ganesh is deeply committed to the state. This is the third or the fourth time I am troubling him to come to Kerala. So he came and addressed the audience in CII, also last TiCon. So Ganesh, if you can, please.
Good morning. VK said it's my third time. It's actually the fourth time. And VK really is very welcoming host. Little he knows that he doesn't need all these persuasive skills. I'm a big fan of Kerala. I'm a big fan of Kerala food. So the first thing I did after we landed in Cochin yesterday was to go to the Grand Hotel and try out the grug and all the fancy food they had to offer. So, when I have the opportunity to talk about IT, which is a passion of mine, and have great food, I would come again and again. And it's a very humbling experience to come to TiCon because I had the opportunity to come and speak to the first edition of TiCon. And I also had the opportunity to spend the time with great entrepreneurs from Kerala in the TiCon charter member retreat. So I met some really fancy people and really learned a lot. So for me to stand in front of you and talk about entrepreneurship is a great honor. Talking about entrepreneurs, I found that no session starts without a joke. So I was looking for a joke about entrepreneurs. I really found this one really hilarious. So entrepreneurs really want their son and daughters to be entrepreneurs as well, right? Most of them want them to be in business. So one entrepreneur decided that he's going to start his son pretty early on entrepreneurship. So he sat down with his son and said, you know what, to be an entrepreneur, you got to be really good at math. So let's start with math and say, son, what's 2 plus 2? The son promptly said, it's 6. Dad was a little upset because the son is in 4th grade, he's probably about 9-year-old, as old as my daughter, and he can't say 2 plus 2. He said, no, son, actually the answer is 6. He said, no, Dad, I thought we were negotiating. So it's really interesting to see that in Kerala, which has always been an entrepreneurial setup, which has always exported tons of things to ancient Roman worlds, it's got an aspiration to become an IT capital, startup capital in the country. It's a very big aspiration. So I thought I would share with you the history of digital entrepreneurship I see as in India. So if you look back, in the early 80s, the first wave of entrepreneurship was all around application services. You saw companies like TCS and Cognizant and Wipro take shape. They predominantly used the huge supply of talent to build phenomenal companies. And if you look at the second wave, the same labor pool which was solving application problems, design, development of systems, was used for business process outsourcing. And there is great success stories there of companies who have been built during the era, Genpact, Spectramind, today which has gone on to become acquired by companies like IBM. DUX was another big story. Now I think we are in the third stage of IT entrepreneurship in India. There is a belief and there is a perception that being a services company is actually not that great. It's not sexy. There is no innovation there. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm a big fan of the first and second generation entrepreneurs because I got benefited from one of them. I worked in TCS. Today, TCS market capital is bigger than HP, Yahoo, and LinkedIn combined. So there's nothing wrong in being services, but we got to figure out what is the next stage of opportunity which comes. There are some big words. I think VK is a lot more smarter than me, so he's talked about cloud, big data, analytics. So I wanted to tell you guys the way I see it. It is about staging experience for the customer. And as you look at all of these technologies, what it means, let's look at day in my life, right? I, as VK said, run the APJ sales operations, which means I'm on early calls with my team in the East Coast, which is Japan, China for me. So I start my day early. I am in front of my computer, taking calls, making presentation, and then it's time to leave my office. As I come down, I'm still on the call, but as soon as I get into the car to start driving, I can actually continue the conversation, look at the presentation, because all my presentations are stored in the cloud. As you drive to office, the small device I'm wearing finds out that I'm coffee deficient. And it also knows where I am in the city of Bangalore. So it tells me that there is a coffee shop nearby. It also has the ability to track that coffee shop and order my coffee ahead of time, while I could go pick up the coffee and continue my conversation and continue my presentation. Along the way, I figured out my colleague is traveling in the same direction and we both are pretty much nearby, and why go in two cars? Because if you've been in Bangalore, the traffic is horrendous. Why have two cars on the road when you could have one? So I send my car back. At the same time he arrives, I go into his car and get into office. As I get into my office, the same device which I'm wearing on my hand tells me that I haven't made the number of steps I should have made today, so I shouldn't take the lift. Actually, I should take the steps and stairs and go into office. And as I go into my office and get settled in, I take on my laptop, and the laptop has the same application open. The presentation has the same presentation on the screen, the slide where I left off in my mobile device. And during all of this time, all the things I've been doing is actually sent to my wife's phone, so she knows I spend 100 rupees on a coffee without drinking coffee at home. So think about this experience and what all technologies has played in this. So obviously there's mobility. So there is all these applications which the mobile phones were using at that time. There is cloud, because the data I had on my computer, on my device has been shared with so many different people, and it gets synchronized, and it is in the same stage when I went to office. And there is analytics and big data, because everything is captured and experiences are measured so that they can provide me with the same experience next time. They know what coffee I like, so it can be automatically recommended. So this technology is brought together as an experience, provides us with enormous amount of opportunity as we think about next generation of entrepreneurship. But irrespective of all the technologies we use and what we think about as cool, there are some fundamental principles of business which doesn't change any of this. To become a very successful digital entrepreneur, you can either be staging these experiences and making people to pay for these experiences, or you could be providing infrastructure and tools for those who are staging these experiences. So we at Dell, we would categorize ourselves in the second category. We provide the platforms and tools which will enable entrepreneurs like you to stage these experiences and make money. And as part of some of these startup firms and as part of things I have seen in Indian Angel Network, I want to share with you a few things which will be important as you think about how to start this company and what is important. One is the technology is really fascinating to you. You get really carried out by the cool things you could do and build. But what ultimately matters is, will somebody pay for this? Right? I have seen a lot of early pitches for investment start off with how cool this technology is, how hard they work to build this. They don't come to, why would anybody pay for this? Right? So any technology you are thinking of bringing to market or developing, the first question is, will somebody pay for it? The second question is, will somebody pay for it enough to cover my cost and generates enough cash? The third question is this technology robust enough that somebody can't copy it quickly, or even if they copy it, the market is so big, with a small share of that market, I can still make a lot of money. And if you can pass these three tests, the only thing which will stand from success and scale is having a good team, an ability to pull together a good team and make this product live and get money from the customers and share the returns with the investor. What I've seen a lot of people do is really get carried away by all the big terms and technology, talk more about their products and how it is coolly put together, but without realizing how we would make money and why would somebody pay to get that. So hopefully, as we think about next generation of technology, it's not about just the cool products, it's not about not having those services or having army of people. There's opportunity in every place. As you think about why the customer would pay for some of these things, the answers would come. And I hope to learn a lot from the rest of the session as well as my co-panelists. Thank you.
I'm going to try and share some perspectives about digital business, the kind of challenges I think it's going to throw up in front of us in the years to come, and where I believe the opportunity lies. It's a broad range of opportunity. If I can get this technology to, here we are. So I think a lot has been said and written and talked about the forces at play here. SMAC is very common, everyone talks about it, but fundamentally I think it goes back to what we'd called out a few years ago in IBM. I think there are three key trends that are driving and permitting this disruption that we see nowadays. The increasing instrumentation in the world. So sensors, devices, now smartphones. Ganesh talked about wearable devices that track caffeine levels in your blood. Nike has wristbands that will monitor your vital signs. Increasing and pervasiveness of instrumentation. All of this instrumentation is interconnected. The Internet of Things, the Internet of Everything, as it's been referred to. And all of that is feeding enormous amounts of data, which then permits us as people who manipulate that data or mine that data to be increasingly intelligent. And that's leading to how significant changes in how people consume, how people take spending decisions, consumers take spending decisions, when to spend, on what to spend, how much to spend, etc. Whom to spend with, brand loyalty. It's permitting analytics. Clearly, mobile and cloud are two sides, of a coin in terms of technology that's creating significant disruption. And for me, the C in SMAC is not so much just about cloud, but more so about cognitive computing. I think we're at the cusp of a significant change in computing models. From what have historically been transactional computing models, we are going to see the world evolve to cognitive computing, where computers are capable of learning, computers are capable of inference, computers are capable of knowledge processing as opposed to data processing, and of getting closer and closer to human logic and human processing. So if you look at some of the statistics here, it's amazing. Every 2 days, in 2013, every 2 days, the world has generated as much data as was generated from the dawn of civilization to 2003. And that number is climbing. 80% of all of the data we generate nowadays is unstructured. It isn't structured data. And the rate at which unstructured data, captured unstructured data is increasing is 15%. So you're going to see increasingly the need for and the challenge in, and VK talked about analytics, but it isn't just about descriptive analytics or predictive analytics on structured data as much as unstructured data, and that's where the challenge lies. Over 1 billion tweets are sent every 3 days nowadays. Over 1 billion tweets. And all of these tweets are sources of insight, sources of data, sources of knowledge. In India, 77% of the people who have smartphones have more than 30 apps on their smartphones, just within India alone. We have the world's third largest internet population, and 59 million Indian users visited Facebook on their PCs and other devices. So when you start looking at it, this rapid possibility and potential for technology to disrupt is a thing that's here and now. It's happening, and it's not just in the US or in Europe, it's happening in India as well. So when you look at businesses, you'll see on your left, you've got empowered and informed consumers, increasingly so. And they're changing, as I said, how they spend, when they spend, with whom to spend, how much to spend, using new integrated channels. And that leads enterprises to face very new challenges. Challenges around order management, fulfillment, challenges around understanding brand loyalty, challenges around not understanding consumer trends as are manifest in your sales figures today or yesterday, but anticipating consumer trends before they happen so that you can re-engineer your product design to be in lockstep or to be slightly ahead of consumer trends. Marketing capabilities. And all of this leading to changes in your back end, to your ERP systems, to your back-end supply chain, to your data warehouses. And so you've got a set of forces coming front to back from your consumers, starting with your consumers that we call digital front office. And at the same time, for global enterprises particularly, you've got a set of changes you need to make at your back end, which trigger you to have to re-engineer your globally integrated enterprise. And this we see as the challenge at hand. Let's look at what's happening in the workforce today. Organizations increasingly who have over the years focused on being more and more predictable, more and more reliable processes, more and more efficiency, are needing to rethink how they're structured, needing to rethink how they train their people, how they recruit their people, how they reward their people. You would have read that a number of global corporations are actually moving away from stack ranking as a performance assessment system. Stack ranking is basically where you assess your employees based relative to each other. And they're moving away from that as a performance assessment system. In the HR world, there are big questions being thrown up about how you can make organizations more innovative and more adaptive. You've got some examples here. So for example, you've got Quirky. Quirky is an organization that's been set up. In fact, it was set up by an ex-IBMer. And Quirky says, give us any product idea you have. The community of Quirky people will vote on the idea. They have weekly sessions to vote. And based on the votes, they decide which ideas to take forward. They have a community of people that will help develop and design the product. The original idea creator and everyone who's involved in shaping that idea gets a part of the monetary returns if that idea comes to fruition. And Quirky as an organization retains a part of the earnings. So here is a business model which actually crowdsources the whole product design and product creation effort. Kickstarter is something similar, but it's focused specifically on creative projects. So in the world of art, in the world of music, in the world of comics, dance, design, you've got a similar accelerator, incubator type effort. And so these kind of organizations, by their very design, are very creative, are very adaptive, are very nimble, and they tap into the best that the team at large can offer. You'll also see, and you are seeing today, and it will continue to increase, that work in value chains is being broken down, is being componentized. VK made reference to that. And it's being broken down largely into components that are rules-based, algorithmic, and components that are experience-based or judgment-based, which are heuristic. And you'll see different treatments being followed for both. For example, TaskRabbit is an organization that connects people who want to have tasks, who want to outsource tasks. And these could be any kind of tasks. Pick up my dry cleaning, take my dog for a walk, get me my morning fix of coffee, whatever it is. It connects people who want to outsource tasks. In fact, microtasking has become common vocabulary now, where small tasks are outsourced. And rabbits, as they're called, interestingly enough, are people who bid to do those tasks. And rabbits build over time digital reputations of reliability, of quality, and the higher their reputation, the greater they can charge for a task when they bid. And the more likely it is that people will pay slightly higher prices for those tasks. Similarly, taskers build reputations on reliability and whether the task, as they described it, works or not. Funding Circle is a site, is an organization that looks to crowdsource the whole area of capital funding. And there are many others like it. Funders Club is one. Google themselves, Google Ventures, have moved to open up venture funding to their employees in the belief that their employees are better, far better networked and far better connected across the entire community than a small group of people working in a traditional venture capital model. They also believe that they will improve morale, they'll improve retention, because the employees now have that windfall to look forward to. So you can see how componentization and then disintermediation or re-intermediation is happening very rapidly. Companies or business models are re-examining and questioning traditional value chains, and they're challenging some of these value chains. They're breaking things down, they're removing components of traditional value chains. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the workplace. We're seeing increasingly virtualization of the workplace. Ganesh described it when he was talking about the calls he has and how everything keeps up in sync. We're seeing a lot of focus on collaboration and collaboration tools. Collaboration is becoming today probably the single biggest prereq for someone to succeed in the world. And increasingly, the ability to collaborate with people across time zones, across cultures. You heard this morning Dr. Harris talk about trustworthiness. Increasingly, we're hearing of and we're seeing examples of digital trust as being a very, very key attribute. It used to be once upon a time your credit score from credit card companies was critical. Going forward, increasingly, we will see your digital trust score as being important. And then clearly incentive models are changing. I mean, an example, if you look at Kaggle, Kaggle is an organization that specializes in modeling and data analytics. And effectively, companies go into Kaggle, they provide the data they want, and they set up effectively competitions, a little bit like Innocentive that DuPont set up many years ago. And you have data scientists, you have people in all walks of life attack that data and try and understand the patterns, try and solve the problems that the person who's sponsoring this has set up for financial reward. And Kaggle itself makes a cut of it, if you will. Amazon has sponsored Mechanical Turk. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. But these are for very, very repetitive tasks that computers can't do. So we talked of heuristic versus algorithmic tasks. So Mechanical Turk, for example, may have someone saying, I'd like to look at pictures, photographs, and identify, where are these specific features in the photographs. And so they're repetitive tasks, and people actually get paid based on how many tasks they can complete and in how long they take to complete it. And so you've got these people who are doing these tasks, who are referred to as Turkers, effectively bidding for and executing. You've got an entirely new value chain from a microtask outsourcing perspective. So when you look at the world ahead and when you look at the workplace, you see some very significant changes. The role of the customer historically used to be a consumer. Increasingly, customers will become co-creators. The way that work used to be planned used to be largely prescriptive, rigid, regulated. Increasingly, it will become component-focused, agile, adaptive. Governance used to be outside in. You used to have frameworks within which you had policies, within which you had processes and sub-processes, very, very detailed, very well-designed, very mechanistic. Increasingly, the governance is going to be self-regulated, and it's going to be far more nimble, far more adaptive. I talked of processes increasing transparency. Sourcing and alliances are going to become far more along the lines of open, transparent, crowdsourced. Performance is increasingly outcome-driven. Organizations are going to be more networks and loose networks. Culture in the workplace is going to change. And increasingly, we're seeing participative and transparent cultures, and HR organizations around the world are being challenged to take what used to be a traditional global enterprise culture of command and control and move to greater openness, greater transparency, greater participation. And technology, as I said, is going to move from recording and transaction processing to becoming much more engagement-focused, and then diagnosis and prediction around those engagements, far more cognitive in nature. So how does our value proposition, how will we look, what are the opportunities in reshaping our value proposition? And we've essentially got three models. Clearly, the simplest thing to do is to enhance, today if you have a business, you enhance your value proposition, you get more connected to your consumers at one end, your suppliers at the back end. And you can augment your products with either greater insight about what your consumers want, or you can shape their experiences better. You could even go so far as to have them co-create your new products, your new product design. And you see some examples of that even within India. You see a lot of that happening today. This is the first step, if you will, of embracing digital business. And by the way, if I may, increasingly you hear CEOs and CFOs talk about how digital business is not about technology, it's actually about business. Very recently, the CEO of Mothercare went out and said, to survive and succeed in the years to come, we need to become a technology business. Not that we'll all become specialists in technology, but we need to become expert at how to use this technology to change the way we do business. The second model is about extending your business model. It's effectively integrating across touch points in your existing value chain. And I gave you an example of Kaggle or TaskRabbit. Another example is Park in My Drive. City of London faces a huge shortage of parking spots. And specifically in the inner city, the density is very high. And so Park in My Drive permits people who have driveways to rent out for parking during the day to connect with people who want to come into the city and drive and park. And effectively, based on the location of the specific driveway, you're willing to pay more or less, you bid, and based on what your previous experience has been with a particular parker, you're willing to accept a higher or a lower bid. Again, an example of complete disintermediation of a value chain. And then you have complete redefinitions. And we've seen examples of this. Bitcoin, clearly a lot has been written, a lot has been said about it. But if you really look at the potential or the promise in e-money, recently JP Morgan Chase is launching their version of Bitcoin, e-wallet, e-currency. And you've got the ability to completely challenge governments, financial regulators, tax authorities. It's going to change the world as we know it, as this takes root, and it will going forward. Interestingly, the government of Maharashtra has started a website called Voice of Citizen, Citizen's Voice. And effectively, they want to open up in a very transparent way. They've started with a problem, at least those of us who live in Bangalore are very familiar with potholes. And there's an Android app that you download that lets you photograph a pothole. The GPS records where that pothole is. Immediately that pothole comes onto a central map that's available to all customers. It's colored red, the place marker. The civic authorities are informed of it, and when they go fix it, they take a photograph of the fixed pothole, they certify it's fixed, and that same marker turns green. And citizens can now see the city's pothole score in reds turning to greens. I really can't wait for the day Bangalore gets this, by the way. But examples of how traditional value chains have completely gone. Today, the road authorities can no longer rely on come and register your complaint, file it in triplicate, wait 2 days for it to turn up somewhere, and only if you have a RTI application will we tell you what is the status of the pothole. So traditional boundaries are just being blown apart. So with that, I'd like to pause here. I think we'll do questions later on. Thank you.
So I have to introduce my company because, we're not a household brand name like IBM or Dell, but, well, for the moment anyway. So Stellar Technologies, we are a software company and have always been a software company. We started out with a product focus and continue. We never sold services. Just as an indicator, 92% of our revenues is license revenues. So extra well-packaged product. If this technology works, I shall go to the next slide. Thank you. So we've heard the past two speakers talking about data, digital, big data, the whole work. So we've always been in the content transformation place and focused on unstructured data. There's enough and more companies, there's enough databases that you can analyze to death and get enough information. But unstructured data has kind of been the poor relation of this whole content business. And we focus on different categories of content, so I'm not going to bore you with all that. And we were one of the 5 SAP startup focused companies last year, and I'm also proud to say one of the winners of TechSparks 30 in Bangalore this year in October. A partial list of our customers, and for the first time, proud to announce that our recent customer acquisition is the Indian Air Force with Wipro as an integrator, and our core other software vendors in this deal are IBM and PTC. So an advice to software entrepreneurs: being small in the world of big data or in the world of digitization, you have to think big. Customers nowadays are looking for focused pieces of software. They don't want the all singing, all dancing, autonomy kind of software where it does everything, including making coffee. You have to be a specialist in your chosen field, and it has to be a very restrictive field. Software cannot do everything. So the Indian Air Force, Wolters Kluwer in the US, Rolls-Royce Aerospace, again, very, very big customer, and very rarely do a 6-person software company, which is what we are, sell into companies like this. So, think big. A little bit about our software story, and our software, the product is called Kimea, which means transformation in Greek. It also means the embalming oil in which the pharaohs were embalmed. So it also means long-lasting. So we have a little take on the name, and all our branding is in the colors of ancient Egypt, which you'd see in most of the paintings in the British Museum these days. So a complete shift from the traditional big blue, red, greens that software companies have been associated with in terms of colors. So in terms of our story, I'm the founder of the company, and with my co-founders, we set up the company in 2004 in Paris, and we were in what was then the cool world of content management. So all the cool technologies did web content management, enterprise search. It was the start of semantic analysis, but we stayed in the relatively uncool world of information processing or data processing. But what we did was create a software in this world that could automate to a maximum what companies were then sending out to what they perceived as low-cost countries. So they were sending it out to India, Madagascar, Morocco, etc., to manually process. Cheaper, but turnaround times probably took a week, but nobody cared, as long as they had a cool front end, which was the content management solution. So the evolution of this, and so I know this world from 2004, but prior to that, there were also all the big document management companies. There was the Documentums, I think IBM with FileNet. So there were, that was also happening. And this is the world that has, now moved towards what's now known as big data. Okay, so but things have been happening for a long time. So Gartner tells us, quoting Gartner, big data is not all about being big and having huge volumes of data. It's also about how quickly you can process multiple kinds of data. And more interestingly, which Gartner again predicts is going to be the big challenge, is the variety of big data. Again, unstructured data, which is 80% of the data that's produced in the world. How do you structure, how do you get information out of a huge variety of unstructured data that can exist in a company? And again, I'd like to see the word in there, they called information processing, which again, as I told you, did exist in 2004, but now it's innovative information processing. So in terms of the 3 V's of the big data, volume, I don't even know what most of this means, but there's all kinds of technologies that you can see. There's the different databases that exist, and most of the big players, including SAP with SAP HANA, are in there. And in speed analysis, this is where most of the startup world is focused. Everyone's analyzing everything from tweets to sentiments to retail data to point of sale data. And just as an example, out of the 200 SAP startup companies across the world, every single one of them is in this analytics space, analyzing various things. And again, in the unstructured information, again, processing is not the word. What we do is we structure unstructured information. There's very few players. At least in the SAP group of 200 startups, we are the only one. But, there could be other companies. But that is where, it's great to focus in a space where there are less players. Okay, so one of the messages there. And they focusing on structured data, structuring unstructured data means, here I have a page of a technical documentation manual. It's actually creating linkages between the tables, the part numbers, what's written in there, linking the footnotes. It's not just taking a page and of PDF and converting it into something. So this is what the unstructured data structuring means to us. And I just want to go to one last slide before, is, from an entrepreneur's perspective, there are a few things that we need to do if you want to be in the software business. My experience is unique because I'm not an engineer, but what I know to do is to create something, is to create a product and to get customers to buy it. And customers don't, and not one single customer has ever asked me how many lines of code we have or what the software is written in. It's about solving something, solving a need, solving a pain point that they have, and as Ganesh said, that they'll cut a check out to you when you spend. So every single version of our software, from alpha to beta to the current version 4, has been paid for with customer money. We've had 5 rounds of funding, but of all the money that's come into the company, 78% has been funded with customer revenue and the rest with angel investment. So that's a really big lesson to learn. It's not easy, especially I think in year 3 or 4 when you actually start getting customers and you have to debug and you have to implement and continue R&D without too much cash coming in. So, it's a hard game, and you cannot. The only winners in the software game are people who persist. And you have a good team. Again, I think Ganesh talked about the team. I have a brilliant CTO. We've got, as I said, we've got 6 team members and 28 angel investors, everyone playing a different role. 10 of them from the Indian Angel Network and the rest spread around the UK, France, Israel, Switzerland, etc. So we have a network that can also pull us together, keep us together. The third, technology lesson, cloud computing or the cloud is not the solution to having bad software. So your software has to be robust enough, has to stand the test of time, and the cloud is just another distribution channel. It doesn't mean because it's on the cloud people are going to buy it or it's accessible to everyone. So your software should have done the test of time before you can put it on the cloud and make it available to a larger base of customers. So really these are, and again, my last message is think big, because your initial customer references have to be flagship names, or the SIs or the system integrators like the Wipro, the Accentures. You're wasting your time with them. They won't pick up your calls. So the only way we got into Wipro for the Indian Air Force project is because we had Rolls-Royce Aerospace as a reference customer, which meant my technical pre-sales was exactly half a day. So you have to think big, get big references right from day one. Thank you.
Thank you, Aruna. That was very insightful. Ravi. Ravi is the chairman of NASSCOM's Product Council, the division which is supposed to be promoting entrepreneurship. So over to you, Ravi.
I think there are going to be a huge set of opportunities to build really disruptive businesses out of India at this point in time. What big few inflection points that we see. About 20 years ago, we had the Y2K phenomenon, and that gave rise to a huge industry that has created massive value here in India, the IT services business. And it gave that fillip to it, right? That little bit of injection of what it was that was causing people to come and evaluate India as a source for services. I think, likewise, I'm seeing 5 or 6 different disruptions that give us a huge opportunity, again, to create another massive industry. And at scale, that's comparable to the kind of work we did in the services space. So I'll skip my personal background. These are the 4 or 5 tech inflections that I see. The first is business model changes, and I think that was talked about. And why is this important? It's important because people are rethinking how they purchase, how they budget for, how they think about their assets, right? And anytime somebody is open to change, that's a great opportunity for an entrepreneur to get in. And I'm going to present these 5 different reasons why I think entrepreneurs have a great opportunity today, because you need that little, crack in the door kind of to get your foot in, right? And this presents one of those cracks. And what's great is there are actually 4 or 5 different trends that are pushing that door open for entrepreneurs, right? Where you can go in there and you can upset an incumbent, or you can go define a new area to go build a brand new business. So this is one, is the business models. And that in itself might be good, but oftentimes the incumbent can also replicate this, right? And so that's not enough. What the next thing we're seeing is you're seeing this architecture change, which is the fact that software is going from on-prem into the cloud, it's going from a server to mobile, it's going basically, you're having to rewrite the actual software. While you're redoing the business model, you're also re-architecting the software. And oftentimes, legacy software is just not going to provide the same experience, the experience that Ganesh described, for instance, the mashups of various services, the API economy, and a lot of the different other examples that we saw in the previous presentations. So the second thing is the architecture changes, business model and architecture changing together, great opportunity, 2 foot in the door in some sense, okay? The third is platforms. For the first time, from some hamlet in Kerala, four young entrepreneurs can get together and build something that they can market to 160 countries in the world, collect in 120 currencies maybe. And you could not do that even 3 years ago without having a huge relationship with a company that had global distribution, that you had a relationship with, a channel relationship with, and where you touched all these customers in some sense. You can today do this, and this is why I think it's a huge opportunity again for young entrepreneurs to go out there and build businesses that are extremely valuable, maybe small in some instances because some of these apps tend to be small, but in aggregate, if you have hundreds of these businesses, you end up having a really valuable ecosystem. So that's the third enabler. It's a huge enabler because it allows, one, discovery, people can find you. Second, you can monetize, right? And third, it's the distribution, which is not only do you monetize once, but you have now a platform by which you can acquire a huge customer base that otherwise you could not go after without a huge expense. And then the fourth is, we've seen this consumerization, which is the whole experience has to be like the experiences on Gmail or on your YouTube. Or whatever you see on your handheld device is what you have to deliver. This is part of the inflection that I talked about earlier. The architecture on the back end is changing, but guess what? The endpoint is changing too. The business model, the back end architecture, the way you distribute, you monetize, and you're discovered, and lastly, the endpoint. When you have all 4 of these changing together, and they're all, you could take advantage of any one of these inflections or all of them, you have a huge opportunity. And then the last thing is this whole data tsunami. We're metering everything, we're measuring everything. That's causing huge amounts of streams of data to come in. And again, the analytics, the insights, all of that was covered by even VK earlier, is a huge opportunity again to combine this other trend that we're seeing here. And along with this, obviously, comes huge opportunity in being able to provide new insight that was not available because physically the data was not available. The pothole data that we talked about just moments ago was not available even 2 years ago. Why? Because we now have a sensor on a mobile phone in a taxi somewhere that's sending up the data, and you can now aggregate that and map it to GIS networks, and then be able to predict and analyze what work has to be done in the future, right? So the last thing is, and I think this again was talked about a little bit across the presentations, is the flatness. Flatness in talent acquisition. You can now build teams, and I know startups that are building teams that span the globe. There's a designer sitting somewhere in North America. There's a couple of engineers here in India. There's actually a salesperson somewhere in APAC. That was not possible without all the collaborative tools. Maybe an IBM, maybe a Dell could have done it, but certainly not a 4 or 5 person startup, right? And you can now do that at the cost of a few dollars a month. The collaborative tools are there, the conferencing tools are there. It's unbelievably empowering for small enterprises to go out there and do that. The funding, we talked about that a little while ago, which is the crowdsourcing of funding, your ability to be discovered by angels throughout the world. If you can't raise right here in your city, you can raise from your country, or you can raise from anywhere on the planet. And if your idea stands the test of, the investor looking at it. So even mentors, you can now, I know startups that have amazing mentors that they've connected to across using LinkedIn and all the angel lists and all of that. And when you go and look at that, that's disruptive because these guys sitting in Bangalore would not have been able to find these mentors otherwise. It's purely because these networks have developed, And if you're smart about it, you can take advantage and get there. And finally, the strategics, in Bangalore, in the last 4 weeks, and I'm just using Bangalore as an example because that's where I'm at, but I'm sure it's happening in other places as well. I've seen about 6 strategic, and what do I mean by strategic? I mean guys like Cisco, Walmart, Target, their top executive teams are coming through Bangalore to figure out how do we engage with entrepreneurs here? How do we engage with the ecosystem innovation that's happening? We hear a lot about Jugaad and frugal innovation. Is there a way we can grab that and create innovation labs in India? And is there a way in which we can benefit from that movement, right? And so there's a lot of interest across the board, across the landscape, that I think you can latch onto. So I think fundamentally, great time to start up. But there's one thing I wanted to leave you with as startups is earlier you could dream about something like, for instance, we had Dr. Harris here. We would fly in space, and maybe 30, 40 years later, you would actually achieve it, right? So the time between those two, when you dream and when it's a reality, has compressed. In fact, there's points at which I see things that you dream about, and it's reality in a couple of years. There's actually things that you might hear about that you say, is that real? It's already happening, right? They're printing skin. They're doing all kinds of things with 3D printing nowadays that you almost have to catch your breath and say, is that really possible today? And is that real? Or is this some kind of a fake story that's being put out on the web, right? So I'll leave you with one final thought, which is, as entrepreneurs, I keep urging entrepreneurs to go out there and think big, think out of the box. And so let's take one example. I focus a lot on the software industry, but let's take one example from the automotive industry, okay? As an example of how somebody thought out of the box and built something that was disruptive, that everybody in the status quo said was impossible, right? So here's what a Ferrari looks like. This is the Ferrari 458 Italia. It's a pretty damn fast car, right? Beautiful car, lovely designed, highly impractical for everyday use, but it's a thrill machine, right? About 250K in the US, probably in India, who knows, 4 or 5 crores, right? By the time you bring it here and set it up, at least. What is this? And I'm sure some of you will recognize this as the Tesla. It's the Tesla Model S. And look at its stats. It goes almost as fast, it accelerates almost as fast, it goes almost as far on a full tank. The tanks are different. One consumes fuel and the other is an electric car. Look at the seating. Pretty good. And check out the price. Unbelievable. And this is the most sought after car. I think with taxes and, if you take the California rebate, whatever, net on-road price is $55,000 or $57,000, okay, in the US. The most sought after car by high net worth individuals in California today. There's a waiting list. So actually they've outdone the Ferrari, the BMW, the Mercedes, everything, because they thought out of the box. Let's take a look at the car just to appreciate the delta. Check out the interior. It's extremely luxurious. It has USB ports, 2 of them on the front. It has 2 USB ports at the back. Even when I walk into any of the luxury manufacturers today, they haven't figured it out. There's no USB ports on the back yet. And you take a look at the interiors. That entire panel is touchscreen. So you can redefine it, you can put it in your own color skins, all of that, right? The only reason they put the wheel, the steering wheel and the pedals is because when they did the first trials, people just couldn't drive a car with buttons. They just couldn't figure out how to do it, so they said, okay, you'll retrofit it with a steering wheel and pedals. That's the dashboard. It's completely a touch screen. It actually simulates dials. So you might feel like you've got a dial in front of you. Actually, you don't have anything. It's just a screen, right? Check out the boot. You can take your whole family on a good trip. You get a few suitcases in there, go pick up people at the airport. It's not the Ferrari, believe me. I've sat in that Ferrari in the passenger seat, and there's no place for anything, not even your backpack once you get in, right? It's unbelievable, this car. And guess what? They have a boot in the front too. So it's pretty good, right? You have so much luggage space, you're seating 5 people comfortably. You can go from 0 to 100 in 4.2 seconds. And guess what? The car is super silent. I've walked beside it, and they actually had to put ambient noise in the car because pedestrians were in risk of getting knocked over because they would not hear the car come and they might just start walking in front of the car. So they actually have a little bit of noise that generates in the front because it's so silent, the engine. So let's take a look at a couple more features of the car. The entire roof has been redefined. It's complete glass. And guess what? You might say, does that not look dangerous? This glass roof has received the highest rating ever with the US Transportation Authority. It actually broke the glass machine, the testing machine. And you go take a look at it. Higher rating than all the SUVs in the US. And you've seen the US SUVs, right? They're pretty strong and big. For a roof crush test, this actually outdid all of those. It's the handles just come out when you touch. It's biometric sense, so it knows who you are. It's got a remote key as well if you have to give it to your driver. And look at the engine. Look at the fuel tank. Everything you saw inside was only possible because of this redefinition. It's a reimagination of what was a traditional product, right? And it's all been done in the last 8 years. So this isn't like, somebody put 40 years into this and this is a natural evolution. This is actually a leapfrog in some sense. It took a visionary to do this. It took somebody to take a bet on this visionary. So, my parting thought there is, think really differently. Because if you're going to build huge businesses, you've got to think differently than everybody else. It's very hard to build disruptively big, valuable businesses by thinking incremental or thinking refinement. Very, very hard. If you think differently, you might just shock everybody and even yourself. So thank you very much, and I'd be glad to take questions by email later. And
Ravi, that was absolutely fantastic. So to share his thoughts, he's obviously will be sharing his own personal as well as the sentiment of the government with regard to entrepreneurship. Bharat Bhushan.
Entrepreneurship and government sounds a little like Christ and Antichrist. One of the tough parts of my job is that I get called to speak on subjects where just about everyone in the audience knows more about it than I do. But I've been in some tough situations earlier. As health secretary, I distinctly remember talking to a group of gynecologists and telling them how to deliver babies safely. When compared to that, this is a walk in the park. I was actually listening intently to experiences which our panelists were unraveling before us. As someone had said, a famous person whom everybody knows had said that the world's leading companies remain leading companies until a kid working out of a garage comes out with a new idea. Now the world has become much smaller. It is only the ideas which matter and the way we go ahead and implement the ideas in an honest manner. Integrity is very important. And there are so many success stories. And also there are many, many people who fall by the wayside. Fortune, luck is a major player, but more than anything else, it is a dedication and persistence which matters. While I was coming to this place, I had borrowed some ideas to talk about from VK, but I just given up. I don't want to go into any expert opinions I have on digital entrepreneurship. I would only like to say that in its own way, the government is also trying to do something. As we know, there are some initiatives which are taking place right here in Kerala under the initiative of e-governance programs. A few years ago, I distinctly remember, I remember watching a Malayalam movie where, the background is that there is nobody who can avoid going to a village office to get a certificate. So there was this movie in which there is a protagonist, young, innocent young man from Bombay who comes to Kerala to collect the compensation due to him because a portion of his land had been acquired by the government. So he comes in the morning train and he tells somebody that I have come to collect my dues and I'm reserved to travel back in the evening train. So the entire theater burst into laughter. So I think the time is not far off when through technology we'll be able to render this sort of service. Already you know that nearly 70 certificates being issued by the village offices are available at the click of a button. All you have to do is scan your eligibility documents and you can have a printout of the certificate. The driving licenses, for example, you can register for it and it's almost perfect. Why I say almost is because we were making a lot of proud announcements on it when my transport commissioner, Rishiraj, came to me and said, "Sir, we have a problem. There is a small print at the end that finally after all these processes are over, you are required to approach the local motor vehicle inspector and collect the license in person." So we are getting over that. There are impediments at every stage, but slowly things are looking up. I would like to compliment Tai for having organized this session and this conference. I'm sure this will be a big morale booster, particularly to the young entrepreneurs who are attending this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bharat. Thank you for your address. So now I would request Anup Ambika to tell you his real life experience as an entrepreneur starting here and then how successfully he was able to actually convert that as a business. Anup.
My name is Anup Ambika, and I often get Miss Anup Ambika, but it's Mr. Anup Ambika. Ambika is my mother's name, and I'm not a student entrepreneur. I'm not a startup, so-called, to say. I've been in the business for the past 10 years, and I've done my fair enough of industry experience before starting the company here in Kerala. It's often said that it's one thing to be an entrepreneur and another thing to be an entrepreneur in Kerala. Because, at least the perception is that there's a lot of hiccups, there's a lot of problems that could happen if you want to start an organization, start a firm, and work your way up through the organization. My experience was a little bit different. I had the so-called protection of Technopark and the Technopark Business Incubation Center, which provided a plug-and-play facility for me to start the company. So why did I become an entrepreneur is one of the questions that people often ask me. I did my graduation from University of Kerala in Computer Science and Engineering. And my story is very similar to the normal software engineer who works in Bangalore for 2 years, goes to US for quite some time and settled down there for good. Only thing is that I changed my mind 8 years down the line and decided that I'll just come back and set up my own show. Why? I guess you could call it the 30-year itch. You could say that I was putting in long hours at other organizations, which I thought might be better spent doing it for my own organization. I always thought that I could be a job provider, a job creator. And then one of these days in 2004, I happened to work as a consultant for an insurance company based out of Chicago, where they asked me to do the multidimensional data modeling. Up until then, my experience of data was MS Excel or MS SQL databases or Oracle databases, where you had the traditional entity relationship diagrams and joins and Excel reporting and things like that. So, you can safely say that I was only used to look at two-dimensional models until 2004. And that was my first experience of looking at a multi-dimensional or looking at data from multiple dimensions. So I created cubes, I played around with it a little bit for people who are familiar with analytics and data modeling. I also thought that this could be the future as a lot more of data is going to get collected. This could be the future of the industry where people will use data to make decisions. So all of a sudden I got excited. I talked to a couple of my friends. We had a small angel funding of 25 lakhs from 5 people. And I worked out a business model which will have a burn rate of 1.5 lakhs per month. This was in 2004. It was still possible. We all took huge pay cuts. And then I moved into Technopark Business Incubation Center. I hired 10 statisticians to start with. That was probably one thing that I did differently from a regular software consulting house. I went to the Cochin University of Science and Technology. I hired people who had post-graduation in statistics, post-graduation in engineering statistics, etc. I did not have a project to start with, so we started learning. We hit upon a tool called SAS, which is like the SPSS, which IBM has acquired lately. SAS is one of the biggest statistical analysis software tools available. We did the training on SAS, and we started asking people for data. So can you give us some data so that we can analyze and give you back some results, and we get paid in that entire process. So people said, no. I mean, the large banks, insurance companies, governments, why would they engage with a 10-people company doing their statistical analysis or, trusting them with their data? So people said, no. I mean, Anup, we like your enthusiasm and all, but we are not going to share the data with you. The reason why I wanted to say this is, when we say that there is a lot of opportunities available, yes, the opportunities are available, but the opportunities are only available to entrepreneurs who have the muscle to prove to the clients that, yes, I can deal with your data safely. So let us say if you want to implement data security in your premises as a startup, that by itself is going to cost you a lot of money and get the certification. So my business plan was just, hire 10 statisticians, train them on SAS, they will do the analysis, I'll get the money. No, it was not as simple as that. People started saying, no, I'm not going to share the data. So what happened? I moved forward. I was desperate. It was 3 months, 4 months down the line. People were getting frustrated sitting there, just doing learning and training and looking at analysis data sets and things like that. Fortunately, sometimes there is an element of luck, I have to admit, So we also started our marketing things. We started putting together these PowerPoint presentations, started looking at various companies who are into SaaS and all that stuff, started sending marketing materials to people. So very soon, one of these people came back and told me, I can't give you my data, the financial data or the retail data or anything like that. But what I'll do is, you can start working on some clinical data, the clinical research data that is coming out of the clinical trials, and do the safety and efficacy analysis for clinical trials. Well, I didn't have any idea about what clinical trials is, or, there are some guidelines like ICH GCP guidelines, CFR Part 11 compliance guidelines, etc. We had no idea whatsoever about what all these things are. So you could say, my 15 years of experience went down the drain. I'm not a statistician, I'm a software engineer. I did not have any pharmaceutical industry experience. So I'm standing there at ground zero, struggling to start. We goofed up the first project, then we went into the second one. I think by that time we had learned a lot. What we learned, we put it into a PowerPoint and we started sending across to people. And very soon people started responding from East Europe, Germany, Switzerland, etc., asking us for little help on doing their data analysis. And then in that process, we learned that entire thing of clinical data management and biostatistics. Again, lesson learned is that you start an enterprise, and this I'm talking about a service industry that I started. You start an industry with a certain intention, and people ask you to focus on that particular industry. Oftentimes, you have to take a deviation. And that deviation has to be followed or applied with persistence that you have to learn. You have to continuously learn new technologies, new paradigms so that you stay afloat. Because at that point of time, our only intention was we need to pay the salaries, we need to stay afloat, nothing else. So we did that, we started traveling. So one thing I did not again budget for was the marketing budget. I mean, I wish I had started with a 1 crore as opposed to the 25 lakhs because, I had my first client from Bulgaria. He told me, we like your presentation and everything, so why don't you come over to Bulgaria? We'll put you up in a nice hotel, but you'll have to bear your travel expenses. So we went back to the ATE and said, why don't you just get us a ticket charge to Bulgaria? And it came to 1.5 lakhs. For me, 1.5 lakhs is 1 month of running. So I actually took the risk of telling them that, let's try to sort all these things out over a teleconference. But if it didn't work out, then I'll go travel to Bulgaria and come and visit you, which is a huge risk, let me tell you, when I think about it now, because you actually had a chance of starting your first project and you're saying, no, I will not come, I'll try a teleconference first. But it worked. I mean, again, an element of, you call luck or God's grace, or you could call it whatever you want to call it. So we started working on the clinical data management and biostatistics. Then we started getting introduced ourselves to the Oracle RDCs, the SAS, the SPSs for doing the social data analysis. We had our flair of R, which is an open source statistical analysis tool, which is often used by the data scientists these days. And looking at some of these good work that we have done in the past, one of our friends came back and said, it looks like you are growing into a fairly, and one hiccup that we had was that we were stuck with the Technopark Business Incubator for the first 3 years because we did not have space to grow into. The Tejaswini building was just getting ready for people who are familiar with Technopark. And we were waiting, and only till 2008, I did not have a proper office. So I would tell my clients not to come for an audit because the moment they walk into my office, the audit has failed and the client has probably gone. So I will try to dissuade them as much as I can. These are all things that will work against an organization, Somebody come and ask me, VK comes and asks me, I would like to come and audit your facilities. And I say, no, I'm going to be on a business trip for the next month or so. Can you just make it, the next year or something like that? People will immediately realize they're also smart people. This guy is trying to, take it for, not try to dissuade you from coming. And people will immediately realize that. But again, 2008, we started a new office in Tejaswini building with a 2,000 square foot of office space. We hired people. We had a fair amount of people working for us. And looking at that, I think people came back and said, why don't you try out something to do a software development? So for me, I was happy personally because I'm like, I'm the software person. All my life I was doing software. I did my programming, went up the ladder a little bit, worked for startups, worked for multinationals, etc. So we fairly grew into a team of another 10, 15 people in that .NET development area and some C programming and things like that. Then someone came back and asked, okay, here you have some data. Specifically, I'll tell you the example. There is this something like the Mahindra timeshare in US called Cendant RCI. I'm sure many people are familiar with it. So RCI was, the analytics division was headed by an Indian. And he came back and said, I have got my customers looking at other timeshare options. So can you build a model which will predict my customer churn? So I look at customer A and say that there is a 95% probability that this person is going to go into another timeshare facility. Same thing applies for the telecommunications, same thing applies for banking, etc., etc. But this particular example was for tourism. So, give me a strategy note for doing that. So I am again, this naive software engineer who knows nothing about analytics or statistics. So I went back to my statisticians and say, please look at the data and see what is a strategy that you could come up with. So they, with their expertise from what they have gained from the university and whatever biostatistics that they have done so far, they came and said, these are the various strategies that we think could be adopted for predicting the customer churn. I went back, presented that paper, and he looked at the paper and said, Anup, I like this paper. I mean, you have written everything other than what is required. To predict the churn or to predict the death of a person or a critically ill person, etc., you use what is called survival analysis. How long this customer is going to survive in a particular model. It had everything else but survival analysis in it. So that is when I realized that, so where is my experience? Where is my domain expertise or the analytics experience per se? Because we talk a lot about analytics these days. And most of these analytics is now, like in VK's value chain that he showed, it's only in the reporting. I did not remember the specific word that he used, but it is only presenting data in front of people. And I think the next one is also fine. But when it gets to the predictive analytics or the prescriptive analytics, things get a lot more different, a lot more difficult, a lot more complex. So what is predictive analytics? I've got data from Tycon last year, and I look at the patterns of the people, and I say that there is a good chance that so many people are going to attend Tycon this year, or so many people are going to churn out of Tycon this year. This is going to be the demographic composition of the people who will be attending certain sessions, etc. That is predictive analytics. So you look at the past data, you predict the future. What is prescriptive analytics? Prescriptive analytics is where you don't know what your business problem is. You're not growing. So you have a chunk of data, and out of that chunk, you actually identify clusters of intelligence. You imagine that you have got terabytes of data which gets visualized on a map or a graph or something like that. And then when you just plot, let us say, call it, for people who are familiar with graphs, call it a scatter plot, and you will see some areas where things are clustered together. Those areas are your areas of interest. And then you start digging deeper into it and try and find what the problems are. This could be applied to multitudes of verticals like pharmaceuticals, new drug design, retail, financial, stock market predicting, etc., etc. You have scores of tools available. You have things from IBM, you have SAS, you have R, which is an open source. Then you have the RapidMiner, the NIME, the open source technologies that are coming up. The problem is the tools are only for people who know how to use it. Not from a technical point of view, but from a functional point of view. So that functional experience became a challenge for us. So we started looking at other places, like, Genpact is doing a fair amount of analysis. I'm sure IBM Analytics is doing a fair amount of work in this area. There are other good companies who are doing, like Mu Sigma, for example, in Bangalore is doing a fair amount of data analysis. So we started looking at people who they hire and see if we can do a little bit of lateral hiring. Very difficult indeed. To attract people to Kerala, it's extremely difficult. So we are now at a stage where we have passed the inflection point of 10 people. We have passed an inflection point of $1 million in revenue, and facing with a problem of scaling up into the 200 people company, and at the same time building a non-linear growth strategy wherein we will have the products in this area, much like what you mentioned in your presentation. And I'm happy to mention one thing. I know it is kind of a marketing note here, but I still would use this opportunity to say that. In one of the presentations, there was a mention about the Maharashtra government doing a C-click, thing. I know some of these people who are sitting in that audience are laughing at me because we have exactly the same kind of thing that is developed in the last 4 to 6 months, wherein we call it ECHO and we call it power to the people. So we want to use the crowdsourcing of data from the various smartphone users. So you need to have location services or at least the data connection enabled. So you can use your phone and you can take a photograph and report it immediately. You have a control center, and in that map, there will be a dot popping up, which will show the exact location of that problem. I even showed it to Mr. P.H. Kurian, who is the IT secretary, and he wanted to use it as a distributed system for various departments, but then, my idea was that not all problems could be solved. So first, you need to have data to analyze the data. At this point of time, I think with government, I'm sure the major problem is that the government does not have enough data to look at. And this way, you engage the people or use crowdsourcing as an opportunity to get data onto the government centers, do some analysis on the data. One example could be, let's say there is an accident cluster that is happening in a certain sector of road. Then you know that there is something wrong with the alignment of the roads, or some sort of issues that is there persisting to that, maybe a school or some other institution that is causing the problem. So such things could be immediately identified, and in any sort of diseases, epidemiology problems that gets reported from a certain sector, then you know that there is an outbreak of a disease in a certain area. So I'll just use that as a sales pitch to since the Chief Secretary is here on stage, I thought, it might be a good opportunity to just tell him that don't go to Maharashtra to get that solution. We already have it here in Kerala. So that, and as part of the non-linear growth strategy, we are also working on a couple of more products called iBro, which will take data from unstructured data sources like the social media data and the disparate data sources, web scraping, etc., put it into a unified schema and give some intelligence to people. And we are also in the process of building together a data mining team, data scientist team, particularly consists of applied mathematicians and statisticians. And the reason why I want to mention it here is because it's high time that we start looking at science as the basis, not computer science as the basis or IT as the basis. We need to have a scientific base, be it mathematics, biology, computational biology, statistics. We need to build our base on top of that science to build our institutions. And only then that institutions are going to sustain in the longer term, because people are looking for value. So that is, I was asked to actually tell the aspiring entrepreneurs about what are the problems. I have little time. I'll just give one more sentence to it. There is a poem about the road not chosen. If somebody asks me, do you regret it? I am standing here with, I don't know, the who is who in the Indian IT industry on a stage sharing my experience. Would it ever be possible without starting Kriya? No. The amount of people that I've interacted with, the kind of experiences, the countries that I've visited in the past years, that by itself, that experience by itself, let alone, forget about the money, forget about the capitalist part of the whole thing. Just think about that experience. That experience by itself is worth it. But be ready to face the challenges. You don't have the right infrastructure, you don't have the right people. You have to create it from scratch to a certain extent if you're starting as a 10 people company here. So be ready with your funds, be ready to allocate some funds for marketing, be ready. Say for example, GTEC now has started a Global Connect initiative, which actually helped us. I think this comes from the vision of people like VK, who does not want us to go through the same issues that he went through. So basically there is a sort of mentoring happening. There is an ecosystem that is getting formed under the leadership of various trade bodies. There is a lot of money available for your angel funds and things like that. There is a lot of support from the incubation. Make use of it, but be ready to face challenges, be ready to face a lot of pressure, stress, your wife, all that stuff. And be ready for all that, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of perks waiting for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Amit. Anup, that was very inspiring, and I'm sure it will be useful for all the aspiring entrepreneurs here. We have now time for some question and answers. This is a rare opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, that you will get to ask questions to probably the most leading thought leaders in the industry in our country. We have a bit of a struggle because 3 of them have to catch a flight at 3:30. So we really need to, it's our responsibility that we help them leave this place in good time to catch the flight. But nevertheless, I think we will have still some time to ask questions. So any questions? The floor is open, please. Yes.
Yes.
If you can identify yourself first, please, and then ask the question.
I'm Zulfikar Marikar. I'm basically in the automobile industry, based out of Trivandrum, but operating through Kerala and part of Tamil Nadu. My question is, to any of you for that matter, you're all talking about how data is going to be really handled in the future. Where right now from your server, it's going to go into the cloud, and then you'll have people from various places handling it to process it and all that. How does one ensure security of your data in this whole process? Because right now, in fact, information is sort of available to anyone. There's no way you can control your data, in fact. How would we sort of secure data in this situation?
Who would like to go at it? The data security in the digital era.
Yeah, so I think, there's 3 sets of issues there. There's the privacy issue, there's the security issue, and then there's the storage and access, right, issue. And, these are problems, you've raised problems that are coming about and are being kind of surfaced because we've now got huge amounts of data, right? And, I think there are solutions for some of them. Some we've even had the whole PRISM thing that happened recently, where we had, data being compromised in transit, right? In some sense. So I think you'll start to see opportunities there for entrepreneurs. I think, for instance, a lot of governments will start to have safe harbor. So we will have to have data reside onshore here in India. So that might give rise to a lot of cloud opportunities, storage opportunities for some folks, right? There'll be a lot of encryption type opportunities as well. So I think, at a very high level, you will have to trust the platform folks. You'll have to do your due diligence on that. Some of it you will just have to, you won't know where the data is going. Some of the profiling data, how people are indexing, aggregating data on you personally also is very hard now to know. But, you have to come back and trust the community in some sense, finally, which is some of this will get outed in some sense if somebody's misusing it, abusing it, right? And I think the big platform players have a big interest in making sure they don't abuse it, right? The fact that they have data with them, because the brand will suffer, right? And so I think, there's a fine balance here. There's no easy answer to what the question you posed. Honestly, there's nothing easy because data is in so many different silos. Even if some of the biggest companies said we will do this and that, right? It's true, they will do that. But the problem is there are others that also have data, right? Lots of people are collecting data all over the place. So it's a very, very tough problem. Fundamentally, we'll have to figure out as a society and it's borderless, how you solve this problem. Not an easy one if anybody else has.
So I just had a point of view to add. This is clearly a question that I think everyone is focused on, and today the kind of applications of available technology are actually constrained by not having clean, clear answers to some of these problems in many segments. And I think you're going to see, and we are seeing already, the envelope being pushed every day, every month, every quarter. And the 2 main sort of sets of stakeholders in this, one is the regulators. Clearly, regulators today are grappling with the problem. We've seen a wave of new regulations come in over the last 3 or 4 years across various jurisdictions. And the second is in this whole value chain of data center operators, cloud providers, content aggregators, etc. We're seeing there's a term or there's a phenomenon called the stack master. Gartner calls it the stack master. It's the dominant players in this chain. And the need to evolve standards and have them applicable across the value chain. So effectively, you'll see this sort of this phenomenon where the reliability of these standards and the way they're implemented And the degree to which these standards are in sync with the regulators, or the extent to which the regulators are keeping pace with what's happening, on the one hand. On the other hand, the extent to which these loopholes are exposed or come out, as Ravi was talking about. This is going to permit or constrain the applications of this entire new set of technologies. So no answer, a lot of movement. We're going to see a lot of change in this space.
Okay, thank you, Suhas, and thank you, Ravi. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Saju Balakrishnan, running a company in Technopark TBI. My first question to VK, actually, your presentation was regarding digital leadership, and I think it is more focused on business area. My question is how this digital world is going to change the governance of countries. And my second question to Suhas regarding Bitcoins. You referred in Bitcoins in value propositions, and I would like to know how it is going to change the world of transactions. And I know one thing, Virgin Atlantic took Bitcoin seriously. The reason, I think, in the last month or something like that.
Thank you. So I didn't get what's the specific answer that you wanted from me on the digital world? Oh, the governance of countries. So if you can just visualize, if I take a very, I would say, very bullish, outlandish kind of a view, how can we in the digital world, through crowdsourcing, with instant communication, with billions and trillions of pieces of data being able to be processed instantaneously, can we do away with our fundamental thoughts about governance? Do we need to have 540 members of parliament elected once every 5 years to actually voice our opinion? And that to once in 5 years, the logistics, we would have actually elected them more often, but the logistics is so difficult that we are doing it once in 5 years. And today, all of those questions can be directly, we will be able to actually, the crowd can actually have a decision directly taken. So that is quite a, pushing it too far. So the governance of countries will be significantly changed in a digital world. Can be significantly changed. And the first and foremost thing that we can do is, as long as we can bring in transparency in the system, and that is the first thing, if we bring transparency in the system, clearly in the equation of people, government, business that we are actually talking about, all the entrepreneurs are going to have some sort of a business to it. What I mean to say is that there is an input and output. So in that particular equation, if we can have transparency, then the trust that people have in government will go up, the trust people will have in business will go up, as much as the trust that government will have in business and business or the industry in government will go up. I think so that is the first area to be addressed, and we are doing quite a bit through the e-governance initiative, Aadhaar initiative we are doing quite a bit. So I think it will change, it can change dramatically, and we need leaders like our Chief Minister yesterday. He was so passionately talking about entrepreneurship and how it should change our state and our country. So the presence of our Chief Secretary sitting through this session, the 2 entire hours of session, indicates that we have the right mindset. Suhas, to you.
When I spoke about Bitcoin, I was referring to Bitcoin as an example of a digital currency. Digital currencies, Bitcoin is not the only one. There are a number of them out there. In fact, one of the most classic examples is the Linden. So there was Linden World, which is effectively a game, which has a virtual currency called the Linden dollar, and it's traded. And people actually buy Linden dollars to play the game or to operate in that virtual world. People sell Linden dollars when they've accumulated enough. It's one example. Bitcoin is another. What JPMC has recently sort of launched is yet one more. The key point is the potential impact of digital currencies on tax authorities, on authorities like the Reserve Bank of India or the Fed or any other authority regulating the economy of any country. The ability for these digital currencies to flow across the world potentially unregulated. So there are very, very far-reaching implications, social implications, implications to governance around digital currencies. And because this is like the Wild West, it's pioneering new territory. No one quite even knows the kind of questions to ask. There's a lot of thought that's going on already about it. Governments are challenged, economists are thinking about it, and we're going to see again, this is one more aspect of the new world that we are heading towards.
Thank you. Ranjit.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ranjit. I represent an organization by the name GTech, Group of Technology Companies. That's a consortium or the industry body of about 160 IT companies in Kerala. Yesterday during a plenary, we heard that the VCs or PEs are looking for, or they have this liking for product companies, but not services companies. And this is being repeated so much that we get the feeling that there is no more scope for the IT services companies. Is that true, or do you still see, or do we still wait for some explosion as far as the IT services is concerned?
Absolutely rubbish. VCs are looking for companies who have higher margins. That's it. They don't care whether it's coming from products or services. In fact, I'll give you an example of an analytics company which I'm closely associated with, which makes 45% gross margins today. You could argue as a services company, that's the most valued private company in India today. So I don't think the VCs are looking for products or services. They're looking for companies who make high margins. That's it.
I'll add, you've got products on one side, you've got services, and then you've got solutions. I think, what Ganesh is saying, people are looking for solutions. And solutions will be a combination of product and services going forward. All the product guys want to sell their product as a service. All the service guys want to sell their productized service, right? So it's just a spectrum. So I think, as long as you have something that's really valuable, high margin, high amount of customer retention, high growth opportunity, VCs will be interested,
Thank you. Any other question? Yes? Can you please give the microphone? Out here in the front. Yeah, okay. After you.
Myself, Manoj Balakrishnan, leading CCS Technology and IT Services Company. My question is to Suhas. We are talking about latest technology. People are talking about bitcoins and how to adopt that. When I look at the domestic market, we are not even adopting the proven technologies. So can you give a view why the adoption is slow and how it is impacting the domestic business and the growth?
So I'm not sure I've fully understood if your question is, if I can just test my understanding, you're saying why are we in India slow in adapting or adopting technologies? Is that the question?
Yes.
I think that the secret ingredient of a lot of this disruptive change, clearly there's an element of technology there. All right, there's an element of a newer technology offering potentially more disruption, more value. But if you look at some of the innovation, Tesla aside, you look at some of the business model and operating model innovation that's happening around the world, it's not actually using cutting edge technologies. It's about the way that existing proven technologies, the way that these technologies are being used. So I think the constraint, if you will, is our imaginations in the country, our willingness to take risk, and our willingness to go after these big, bold, creative ideas. Whilst there are newer and newer technologies coming up, and there are many ventures whose focus is in using the latest technology to add value, I think that there's a lot of value still to be obtained, even with proven technologies, just by questioning and challenging the status quo. My view, anyone else?
I think the biggest enabler for adopting this technology is bandwidth, and the bandwidth is still not extremely prevalent in India at the speed at which some of these applications might need. So as the bandwidth gets penetrated more and more, you would see these adoptions more.
Okay. Can you just hand over the microphone, please?
Thank you. My question was for Mr. Bharat Bhushan, but I think you might be able to help. I'm Dr.
At least I will be able to convey to him when I meet him in the afternoon.
I'm Dr. Dinesh Verma. I'm representing an NGO which provides vocational training for visually handicapped people, for blind people. And we also have a company that is developing smartphone apps and other devices which are useful for the visually handicapped. My question was directed towards how to get government support, government funding for technologies which are not going to make a lot of money, in which the angel investors and especially the venture capitalists are interested. So we have approached in the past angel investors, and the first thing they say is, well, this technology is not going to make us a lot of money. So we've been told that it's the government who will help. So that was my question, how to get to that source.
I'll definitely take that question to, again, Chief Secretary is here for the valedictory function. So we will definitely take to him. But one thing I can convey to you, which I am aware of it because of my interaction with the government. Our Chief Minister, yesterday in a conversation, our Chief Minister said one of the areas that Kerala would like to be the first in the country and perhaps in the world is in terms of how to support physically and mentally challenged people. And so in fact there was somebody who came to meet him, and it was an unplanned meeting, and there was a judge waiting outside, and he gave 40 minutes of his time to this person who came, who is a specialist in actually educating handicapped, challenged people. So it is very much on the top of his agenda. So I'm sure you will be able to get a lot of support from this government. But I think we will take that question and discuss again.
Thank you.
So one last question, and then we will conclude. Yeah.
My name is Suresh. I'm representing a company called Experion Technologies from Technopark. The sessions we had yesterday and today were very inspiring for startup companies and first generation entrepreneurs. My question is, how does a successful startup ecosystem affect the established companies like IBM or Dell or IBS? Does it help?
Yeah, so how will startup companies help large corporations? So I will give my view because Suresh used to be with IBS and went on to create a new company. So how does it actually help? In fact, very large companies, it will be like IBM, it will be a different way. In one of the ways in which how small innovation is easy in smaller setups. Large corporations, it is an effort. And implementation is even more effort because you have your revenue targets and your lines of business are running, and you have to create separate units which will drive innovation, etc. So it is much more easy to get innovation from smaller companies. And one of the reasons why a lot of startup companies, a considerable part of the startup companies at certain stages would want to sell themselves to larger corporations is because for them, their value is the idea and their ability to scale is heavily challenged. So in fact, if you have a lot of startup companies coming up, it would create that kind of an ecosystem to push the innovation in larger corporations. So that is one of the ways in which it would help smaller companies. So I think Suhas, you should give or Ganesh, you should give a view.
I think it scares the heck out of us. If you ask any CEO today of a big company, what is your biggest challenge? They'll say how to culture, which is helping innovation, risk-taking, entrepreneurship in a big company. That's their biggest challenge. And Michael himself being an entrepreneur, he's extremely passionate about this. So we do lots of things to be, always keep closer to where innovation is and real innovation is. We have entrepreneurs events for Dell, the whole marketing theme of Dell for small business around celebrating entrepreneurs. We've just announced a $350 million Dell Venture Fund, which will identify new technologies and new startup companies in the areas we are interested in storage and solutions, so that we just always keep closer to where the real innovation is happening. We also try really hard to keep that culture of risk-taking innovation within a big company, which is not always that easy,
So, I think we are coming to the very close of this session. I hope it has helped actually serve the purpose that we intended, that is to give you views of what are the opportunities, challenges, and the key success factors to become an entrepreneur and lead there in the digital world. And 3 points I just want to leave with you before I request you to give a standing ovation to our speakers. And that is not coming necessarily from this session, it's echoing in all sessions, but it came from the plenary today morning with Bernard Harris. So he said 3 very important points. In fact, he said 4, but I'm taking 1 out of it. 1, he said, view the world differently. Try to see this world differently. It's not easy. Second one, please take risk. And if you can calculate a risk. And the last one, he said, entrepreneurship and creating future, and when you are pursuing this path of risk, ladies and gentlemen, the only thing that will hold you together is your sense of integrity. I think it's extremely important that an entrepreneur upholds the highest degree of integrity, because people are going to trust you, not you, the assets that you have. Your sense of integrity is extremely important. And with that, all of us, I think the vision of our Chief Minister to make this Kerala as the startup capital, I'm quite sure with the support of everybody, we will be able to make that happen. Now, before closing the session formally, I would like all of you to actually express your word of thanks to the speakers who have actually come. Actually, Suhas, it was very inconvenient for him to come, and 2 days back he called me up and said, can you actually excuse me from this? And I said, no, it is very, very important, you should come. And it was a lot of struggle for all the 3 of them to come, as well as Aruna. She has come all the way from Paris. She landed just today morning. So, and Anup actually came yesterday, or yesterday or today from Dubai. So all of them had come here so that we could have this very constructive interaction. I thought the quality and the content of this session was quite very good. That's how I felt. So ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause to our eminent speakers. And thank you for your active participation. Thank you.
Yes. We'll just take a moment. I'd request Mr. Matthews to present mementos to our guests. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks. So we'll break for lunch now and meet at the respective sessions post-lunch. Thank you.